This is The Long Road to Ruin, and I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich, and this here is the best movie podcast on the internet. Why is it the best? Because we take sacred cows out back and shoot them in the head. That's right. We ain't afraid to talk about nothing. And I'll tell you right now, like Dusty Rhodes, I'm bad. I'm a bad motherfucker, okay? I'll talk about anything. I'll talk about bad movies. I'll talk about bad people. And I'm telling you right now, I've started some controversy, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to bring on my guests in just a few minutes, but I need to preach at you. I need to talk. I need to open up the therapy and get the word out, see? Because people have been coming to me on the Twitter and on Facebook, and they say, Mark Radulich, where did you get the word trilogy from? There are 4 Terminator movies. Now there are 5. Fuck you. That's not right. Because here's the thing, right? Here's where I'm coming from. Here's what I'm gonna put it down so you can pick it up. There are 3 Terminator movies that make up one whole story. Then they started a new story with Salvation. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? The first 3 stories are about Sarah Connor and her struggles, her issues, trying to stop the Skynet and Judgment Day. One complete story, and it ends with their inability to stop the inevitable Judgment Day from happening. 1, 2, 3. Salvation starts a new story post-Judgment Day about John Connor, the least interesting character in all 5 movies, and that includes the fucking robots. Okay, folks? John Connor, not an interesting character, and that's why Salvation fails for the most part, other than the fact that it's a terrible movie. But I'll talk about Salvation. I'll talk about Salvation all day long, just not on a podcast called The Terminator Trilogy, see? We are here tonight to celebrate the life and times of Sarah Connor, and I'm not going to have it watered down by a movie that had nothing to do with Sarah Connor, you see? So I'm not afraid. I wasn't misinformed. I know what's up. The Terminator Trilogy with Sarah Connor. Let's do this. Fresh out the tattoo parlor, like a badass mofo that he is, Mr. Sean Comer, how do you do, sir?
Hey, everybody. I'm Sean. You're not. And we are going to leave Salvation burning on the scrap heap. And to everybody else who wants to hear us go off on an ugly rant on that, you know what? We're just going to kind of try to take the show in a little bit of a different direction. I especially know that's what a lot of people like to hear from me. But, you know, we burned through most of those movies by that point. There's 1 or 2 left, and God help us, we're going to get to them. But in this case, it's just not necessary to talk about it. As I told Mark before the show, it's about as necessary to this narrative as X-Men Origins Wolverine is to the combined Bryan Singer and Matthew Vaughn X-Men sagas. It's a non sequitur. It's a non-issue. It's a completely failed misstep that, quite frankly, is best left forgotten. Because, you know what, sweetie pies? It didn't lead to a franchise. And that's what this show is about. It's about franchises. It was supposed to be a new trilogy. To quote one of my favorite lines by Nash of all time, it face planted like it was a new Olympic sport. There's no reason for us to discuss it except for the fact that, yeah, it gave us one glorious, albeit overplayed, Christian Bale meme. So if you want to watch it, you know what? Blog Talk Radio accounts are completely free. Sign up for your own account and talk about it. Quite frankly, I don't really have that much to say about it. So let's get on to talking about 2 out of 3 that ain't bad at all. And let's kick it off with the original James Cameron classic, shall we?
All right. Well, before we do that, we do have a guest with us tonight. I'm going to put my normal speaking voice on my. When he is third in command when myself and Robert Winfrey are unavailable. This man started out as a super fan, and he came on and started doing a podcast in his own right, and it's taken off like a rocket. He's the one that brings you the comics. Mr. Sir, at some point we need to talk about Thanos versus Hulk, because I just got finished reading that, all 4 issues. Here he is, folks, the host of Monday's Radulich and Broadcasting podcast, Source Material. This is the one, the only, Super Clutch fan, Jesse Starcher. How do you do, sir?
I need your clothes, your boots, and your podcast. How's it going?
And that guy's arm.
Yes,
That guy's
indeed.
leg. I'm sorry, that guy's leg.
Yes, indeed. Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. Can't wait to talk movies.
All right, let's get into this. So 1984 brings us the original Terminator movie, directed by James Cameron, written by James Cameron and Gail Ann Hurd, starring the eventual governor of California, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Michael, and Linda Hamilton, with Paul Winfield, who every movie I see him in, he gets killed in some way. It's kind of like... all right, and the original Terminator was your basic, straightforward sci-fi horror slasher flick. You have an unkillable monster chasing a damsel in distress who is protected a hero. To expand on that a little bit, what we have is the year 2029, where the humans are fighting a resistance war against robots and computers who have taken over and have nuked the planet. And on this particular day, they win the war. And as a last-ditch effort to stop the humans from winning the war, who are led by one John Connor, the operating system and control of the whole jigamaroo, Skynet, who I'm now referring to as my one true God, which I'll get into later. But I now pray to Skynet. Y'all have your Jesus Christ and your Buddha and whatever and Moses or whatever it is the Jews pray to. I now pray to Skynet. But I'll get into that later.
Fuck that noise. The singularity is a thing, kids.
Yeah, if there's one thing that I could see Mark definitely believing in, and that is Skynet happening.
I'll get into that in a little bit later in the podcast. People don't need me to get into this rant now. But just follow my Facebook feed. You'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So in a last-ditch effort to save itself from its ultimate doom, it sends back one of its infiltrator units, the T-800, which is Arnold Schwarzenegger, back to 1984 to kill 19-year-old Sarah Connor before she can give birth to the eventual leader of the resistance, John Connor. John sends back his lieutenant, Kyle Reese, who is played by Michael Bean Bane Boone Bon Boombasa. And
if you ever ask to pronounce another name again, I'm never going to tell you what it is because you never listen anyway.
Michael Bain. Okay, got it. So Michael Batman Backbreaker comes back in time to protect Sarah from the Terminator. And what you have is your basic horror chase thing. It's sequence kind of after sequence of this thing trying to kill her and them trying to get away from it. But and that's where I want to go to you guys, because on its face, it resembles any other sci-fi / horror movie, monster chasing a gal. You even get to see boobies at some point. Side boob, but boob. What makes the Terminator movie, the original Terminator movie, stick out so much to the point that it's generated billions of dollars, fans worldwide? It's become a brand in and of its own right. It's so popular. How popular is it? It's popular that whatever studio happens to own the brand at any given time keeps trying to rehabilitate it. Jesse, we'll start with you. Why did this thing become a cultural phenomenon, in your opinion?
A appropriate blend of sci-fi and horror would probably be my guess. I mean, if you look at a lot of the movies around that period of time, you had the Alien movies, which those took off like a rocket. A lot of people enjoyed those, and just like you had mentioned, the unstoppable thrill horror that continued to go on. I just watched this movie again for the first time in a very long time, a few days back, and it really pounded the whole unstoppable machine. And as far as I know, you didn't really see too many movies that were similar to that one, very unique, in which you had a little bit of a whole time travel, I guess, spin on things, and I can't say that was too accepted, or at least it wasn't prominent in a whole lot of movies that you saw prior to that. And it had to have taken a lot of, I don't know, I guess it had to have taken a lot of people by surprise at how good it was. Arnold Schwarzenegger, I don't know, was this Conan? I don't know if you guys know or not. Was this Conan movies prior to this? He started in Conan, and then he went into Terminator shortly thereafter. Is that right?
Keep going. I'll look it up.
Okay. So, anyway, Arnold Schwarzenegger just coming into his prime here. But, I definitely, I remember Robert Wintry stating that it was more of a horror flick, or at least something along these lines. And it was more horror than it was really a whole lot of sci-fi stuff. You had the great special effects, but it was just somebody running from some unstoppable force that was trying to kill them. And every single time you thought...
Let me jump in real quick. He was actually in both Conan movies before Terminator.
Okay. All right.
Conan the Barbarian was 1982. Conan the Destroyer is the same year, actually, as Terminator. Go on.
Okay. But yeah, every single time that you thought that this is done, the Terminator's done. I mean, if you're watching this movie and you initially don't realize that this is a machine at the beginning, that was one of the best parts about it, when Michael Bing Bang Boom shoots him and right in the chest with a shotgun, and you are sitting there like, okay, that's it. He took care of business. And then all of a sudden the thing gets up, and you're like, okay, what is going on here? What in the world am I witnessing? Appropriate blend of horror and sci-fi and action. Car chase, and that is what stood out to me when I first watched it.
How about you, Sean? What do you think this movie? How does this movie speak to the American psyche, the American fan? What is it? What is the big attraction here? Because, like I said, there are so many other movies that it competes with, but this was one of the few left standing at the end of the day.
There's a lot we're going to talk about, but as far as the first movie is concerned especially, there's three things that I've sort of zeroed in on that are worth talking about. The first is the most simple reason why people love this movie. It's fucking cool. Honestly, the narrative, the story structure, it still holds up pretty well to this day, more or less timeless. The action is fantastically well shot, owing in no small part to the fact that James Cameron knows not only story to an underrated degree, but definitely also spectacle. And besides, it's man versus giant evil robot. What are you not going to love about that? But on the more substantive front, especially when it comes to the special effects, you have to look at it and realize that for its time, it truly was part of a revolution in exceptionally high-quality practical effects in Hollywood that, again, to this day, even though at that time a lot of those effects were new and very much in their infancy and really turning heads, they still look impressive even when you're watching them now. This was a time when, immediately prior to Terminator coming out in 1984, we were getting movies like Dragon Slayer and Crow and, to a lesser extent, Lady Hawk that were taking what could be done on a set with animatronics, with makeup. Dragon Slayer ushered in Go Motion as a new effect thanks to the great Stan Winston. About 4 years after this, we started getting some really impressive hand-drawn morphing effects that actually rather impressively preceded Terminator 2. And I would go so far as to say kind of set the stage for what that movie would accomplish. But also, at the same time, it's especially interesting to look at now because of a term that's known as the technological singularity. What is it? Well, very simply, it's a concept that dates back to 1958, and Hungarian mathematician and physicist John von Neumann was made even more famous in 2005 when Ray Kurzweil cited the concept in a foreword to von Neumann's own book, The Computer and the Brain, and which is now believed to be an inevitability that is going to arrive between 2030 and 2045, in which computers, computer networks, and robotics are going to become so recursive that they're able to design, build, rebuild, improve, repair, and generally evolve their own intelligence and technology to such a point that they ultimately far exceed human intellectual capacity and control. So when you look at this and you consider that this movie is only a mere, let's see, that would be 31 years old now, it's actually not just fascinating, but just the slightest bit unsettling. I mean, it's one of those things where we joke, but on the other hand, anybody who has Google in their news alerts lately is well aware of what their algorithms are generating in terms of intelligent responses. I mean, sure, we laugh at the smart-ass, pithy answer that Siri gives you when you ask her to divide 0 by 0, or when you ask her one too many times, what does the fox say? But the truth is, this is starting to get a little bit uncomfortable when it comes to man's interaction with Microsoft, Mac, and all things digital.
Okay. Let's dig a little bit into the movie here. We talked about special effects. My favorite special effects scene is by far the worst special effects scene. Probably, it meant well. I mean, we're talking almost Ed Wood levels here, where he's working on his eyeball in the mirror. I, to this day, have to call my wife out of the bedroom or wherever she is and make her rewatch that scene because it's so laughably bad. But I mean, for its time, they did what they could. But aside from that, let's look at our performances here, our actors and actresses. Schwarzenegger as the menacing Terminator, as the unkillable monster, and all of that. People have derided Schwarzenegger's acting, and in some cases rightly so. I mean, he was one of the folks that absolutely ruined Batman versus Robin in his lack of a portrayal for Mr. Freeze. And it's hard. He's got the thick accent, and he's got sort of deadpan delivery at times. But I think the things that sort of detract sometimes from his ability to act like a normal human being in a movie were absolutely played to his benefit in this one. He's not given a lot of dialogue, and what dialogue he is given is very straightforward. He's just sort of commanding things. Give me your clothes, that sort of that sort of thing. This is, of course, the first time he utters the line, "I'll be back." Which it's funny. I was watching the interview for that, and James Cameron said, we didn't know that was going to play funny. People were laughing before he even drove the car into the police station. And of course, he's now said it in every movie since. But Jesse, I'll go to you first. Schwarzenegger in this really does kill the performance, in a positive way. I mean, I don't know who at that time really could have done a killer robot better.
Yeah, man, he's so. What's the word? I mean, other than robotic, that's about the only word I could think of to actually describe how well he handles it. I mean, there's no. You almost. Again, that speaks to his character and what makes it so believable that, holy crap, that's a freaking robot. And slowing his speech down and giving those, 3-word answers that's a credit to the writing, but I'm sure, Arnie at the time, I'm sure is going to put a little bit of his own spin on it. But again, he's acting like a robot. There's no way I could do what he did in that movie. It'd take me 1,000 takes to try and not smile or act somewhat human in that way. We got him, he became the Terminator to a lot of all the fans out there that watched this movie. And even those that didn't like the movie, he remained the Terminator after this movie was said and done. It helps that there's, however many more, we'll say 2 more that we're going to acknowledge here tonight. But it helps that there's 2 other movies that are out there starring him. But again, he did an awesome job.
Sean, I said during our Terminator Genesis review, and I've said it tonight, and I'm going to restate it, and I want to engage you in conversation about this.
Mm-hmm.
But this really is that the strength of the Terminator trilogy is the story of Sarah Connor. That John Connor's not a big character, and I don't even feel like this is about him. I feel like this is about her. It's the journey from demure, ditzy, kind of, you can't get her shit together waitress into phenomenal, badass robot killing woman. We talked last night on the Terminator Genesis review, which you can find in the archives on the Radulich Broadcasting Network, myself and Robert Winfrey, that that Linda Hamilton, her portrayal of Sarah Connor is right up there with Ripley, and then you have Scarlett Johansson as sort of a distant third in the all-time badass women category. But I think she's the most interesting character in all of these movies. And that's a credit to Linda Hamilton and her ability to play this woman who is jolted, thrown into this world that she at first does not understand, is so far beyond her. Because when we meet her, she's just, she's a waitress. The boyfriends are canceling plans with her, and she talks to the lizard, and she just can't get a life together, right? And she has this experience where she's nearly murdered 6 times. She falls in love with a guy just to see him die, and then she goes on the run because she has now this terrible burden she must carry. She has to give birth to the future resistance, the future leader of the human race. And in Judgment Day, which we'll talk about more at length, she has to wrestle with, and it comes up again in Genesis, as a matter of fact, that she's feeling trapped by her own fate, and she wrestles with this idea that I just want to be free. I want to be free of the fate that has befallen me. I want to be able to make choices, and I feel like they've all been taken away by this crazy future that's unfolding. I think Linda Hamilton did an excellent job of wrestling with that. And really, she's the key to this whole thing. People like to say that it's Arnie. Studio executives like to say you can't have a Terminator movie without Arnie. I beg to differ. If Linda Hamilton sucked, I don't think we would be talking about the Terminator movies today. Well, what's your thoughts here on Miss Hamilton and the Sarah Connor character?
Well, just a few that I can add to what was pretty much you throwing it to me for more or less a sentence after that wonderful summation. But really, when it comes to Linda, I'm of a couple minds. For one thing, I really believe that great chemistry is the product of people who have the right tools to bring to the table in order to play the hand they're dealt just right and get the most out of it. That's something that both she and Schwarzenegger really did remarkably well, and I feel like it goes drastically underappreciated. Just to throw it back to Schwarzenegger for just a second, just for example, because he's a nice counterpoint to what Linda does. What Robert Patrick does in Terminator 2 by really manufacturing a very icy persona and very precise delivery and movement that's measured just so to create that proper impact of cold, relentless menace as the T-1000, Schwarzenegger does in a way that really made him the big success that he was in the 80s. And that is that it was effortless with him. He barely had to try. He accomplishes so much with natural presence that truly there's nobody else from that time that could have been this perfect for the role. He's ideal. He's towering. He's imposing. Slowing down his speech seems to just take so little work on his part. He really melts right into it, which, of course, obviously, that's the deceptive part, is he's really known also for being a very charismatic and often affable gentleman in real life. But here, it's just pure 100% natural, just exuding presence. He pretty much is the cyborg. On the other hand, Linda, as you pointed out, really is the one who puts in the work to the story that, proves that once you've seen Joseph Campbell's Monomyth, you can never, ever truly unsee it in anything that you watch. Because, well, most of the movie is pretty much her call to adventure prior to Terminator 2. But in this case, she really is thrown from what is a comfortable but humdrum existence into a world in which she has to be stronger than she ever knew she could be. And she has to do it instantly. There is no moment to hold back. There is no moment to figure things out or really take stock. She has to flip a switch and transition into a gear that up until the T-100 and her future baby daddy stumbled into her life, she really had no idea her makeup possessed. But once she has it, she falls right into it. Even if she's still under stress, she's able to keep moving and prove that she can keep pace with and even outlast this unstoppable cold killing machine. And really, I don't know. I don't know right off the top of my head if James Cameron already had in his mind a sequel, if he already knew where he would go if he would ever get to do a Terminator 2. But as it turned out, whichever came first, the chicken or the egg, the transitions are immaculate and logical between the two. And in all three movies, Linda falls into very logical, believable places as the character. And the evolution is truly stunning to see, not just because Linda Hamilton is an outstanding actress, but also because, as she more than proved in Terminator 2, for as vulnerable and off guard and utterly shaken by these sudden turns of events as she is in this movie, in the second one, she is physically downright scary. She is like pants wetting me frightening in terms of just how vicious she really is and what an antithesis she really becomes to the humanity that the T-100 has begun to learn. So she really does carry it quite nicely because you've got the call to adventure, and by the way, yes, I know I'm going to miss a couple steps in the Monomyth here. I'm just hitting the ones I can remember. You've got the encounter with a loving God, with a loving Michael Bublé figure who happens to pass a blessing along to her. You could argue that most of the second act and a good chunk of the third is her descent into hell, and by the end of the movie, she's become master of two worlds. She's literally just about the only living person on Earth who truly knows exactly what is coming, and yet she has to live in the present day and make do the best she can, raising her son and somehow managing to not shake every oblivious flashback douchebag that she finds, like a British nanny, to tell them, the fuck is wrong with you? The Compooper is going to kill you.
I'm gonna, and for a lot of people, this may be going out on a limb, maybe even for you guys, but I feel after sitting through the Terminator again that Michael Biehn's character, Kyle Reese, the performance of that character. I mean, people talk about how Jai Courtney is way stiff and he's more robotic than Arnold Schwarzenegger. The polar opposite of that, Michael Biehn, right? To be serious, that's how you pronounce his last name. It's Biehn.
I believe so. That's the way I've heard it pronounced before.
Michael Biehn overacts almost to the point of Jim Carrey levels in this movie. He is. I mean, every line of dialogue is breathy and exaggerated. And I mean, I have two issues with how Kyle Reese is portrayed. One, I just don't find it believable that you would send this hardened, traumatized soldier from the future back, and nobody at any time tells him, by the way, 1984, no one's going to believe a fucking word you say, okay? So tone it down a notch, Hawkeye, and get to the base, and just protect my mom. Don't go crazy. Save the explanations for when things are quiet. Let me set this up, okay? Just so you understand where I'm coming from. He's in the bar. The Terminator's in the bar. Sarah's in the bar. Terminator goes to pull his shot. He shoots the Terminator. Bedlam breaks out. He rescues her from the bar. They go on the run. And the first thing he said to her is, I'm Kyle Reese, number 246701, and I'm from the future. Wait a minute, you asshole. Why are you telling her that? Why can't you just say, hey, I'm here to save you from the big guy who's trying to kill you? Enough said. Okay? Why are you going to this big, long speech? One, that's my first problem, and that's wholly a problem in the writing. And I'll grant him, being breathy and exaggerated in that moment, because of the adrenaline of running from the murder bot, got him to that point. Okay, I'm with you there. He's in the police station, in handcuffs, talking to what he thinks is somebody in charge, but is actually the forensic psychologist. And this is how he's delivering dialogue, okay? Like, we didn't know that the Terminator with the mustard and the thing, and my God, why am I talking to you? Like, why are you talking that way? I don't understand. Like, every word out of his mouth until about the third act where things start to quiet down or dialogue ceases entirely and it's just run from the murder bot.
Let me ask you a real quick question. This might put everything to rest, okay? Did things change after you got laid? Was he less uptight? Was he less breathy?
I would say, like, he starts to get control of himself in the once they get out of the police station, and they're huddled. It's night. They're huddled together. They've put the car off the road and they're in the tunnel, and she's saying to him, "Tell me about your."
Well, yeah, that's
tell me about your
whole theory out the window.
Wait. So are you making an argument that Michael Boogie Birdie's hilarious overacting might have actually been a conscious expression of the fact that Kyle Reese really needed to pop his biscuits?
It could have been the motivation, sir. That is what I'm trying to say.
My God.
Dramatic. No. I'm taking this to the bank. If that's the case, anytime I'm over dramatic, every time I am exaggerated, I'm like, sorry, it's blue balls.
Oh dear God! I think I actually need to fetch a towel or two.
So let's put Jesse's blue balls theory aside for just one moment. Not saying it's an invalid theory, but I don't want to just leave the discussion there.
All right.
Sean, any thoughts about how James Cameron, who directed Schwarzenegger so well, who directed Linda Hamilton so well, allowed this man to go full-on Jim Carrey through two-thirds of this movie?
Now that Jesse actually posed the whole idea that all he really needed was just to get his Snapple twisted once, and just have just one good sloppy rush night of the humpity bumpity with Linda Hamilton. Right now, I'm not actually so sure there wasn't some collusion going on there.
You think that James Cameron as a director is like, listen, this character hasn't busted a nut in his entire life. He's too busy running from the robots. So everything you said, so you must sound like you are about ready to piss your pants through this entire movie until you actually bust a nut.
It's, you know what, it may very well be that the man who would later give the world Aliens, Avatar, The Abyss, and Titanic did in fact say to Michael Benedict Cumberbatch, he did say, okay, I want you to imagine the single most excruciating case of blue balls you have ever had. Take that to the 10,000th power, multiply that by 2, and now imagine that you have also taken a vow of celibacy as a Benedictine monk. That is about half the raging frustration I want you to express until the moment that you achieve liftoff from her launch pad.
So that leaves me with only one question. I don't understand why his character isn't written very well. It's just not. He's a plot device, and I kind of accept him as that, and I don't let it necessarily take me out of the movie. But let's face it. Again, I tell you, and I said this to Winfrey last night. In no way does any human being act this way. You're not thrown into if I were to deposit one of you into 1776, you're not running up to fucking Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Jefferson and be like, stop everything. You have no. Blacks are going to get the right to vote. Stop what you're doing. You don't do that. No human being really acts that way. Star Trek. Terminator, Burning Desires, Things Left Unsaid. Anything you want to talk about? Go.
No, a very great way to start the franchise. We're going to see some themes from Terminator 1 that kind of reappear in the next 2 movies. So we're probably going to talk about a few repeated things that'll happen. But I love the first one. I can't wait to talk about the second one, so I'm going to shut up now.
Sean, Burning Desires, Things Left Unsaid, anything you want to add about Terminator? Otherwise, we're moving on to Judgment Day.
Quite frankly, this is the virtually perfect 80s action movie. Linda Hamilton is utterly outstanding, on par with the best work of Milla Jovovich in the Resident Evil movies, Sigourney Weaver in Alien, or almost any latter-day Scarlett Johansson movie, for that matter, in terms of being able to be a physical match for everybody she's on screen with without coming across like she's trying too hard. Schwarzenegger gets a lot done with simple posture and movement and just natural poise. In fact, just about as much as, say, Tim Curry gets done with sheer personality and being able to act with the makeup in Legend. And what really gets forgotten is the fact that for as much as he is a visually stunning and masterful director, James Cameron is an underrated storyteller when it comes to piecing together a narrative and characters that complement all the bombast that's going on screen. And for the most part, about 9 times out of 10, the other time being Avatar, actually leaves you with a pretty satisfying story to follow along the way. And the most miraculous thing is the fact that almost a decade later, he would goddamn top himself.
Okay, that brings us to 1991, Judgment Day, Terminator 2, wherein we find that things are not going well for the Connor family. Edward Furlong, who plays John Connor, how old was John Connor supposed to be in this? He's like 12 or like 10, 13, somewhere in there. He's young, real young.
Edward Furlong.
Yeah, Edward Furlong plays 10-year-old John Connor, who is currently in foster care because his mother has been taken to a state correctional hospital due to the fact that she is believed to be batshit insane. It is at this time, in the year 1991, that Skynet, having failed to kill Sarah Connor the first time in 1984, has sent the T-1000 Terminator, which is your shape-changing liquid metal magic Terminator, back to kill John when he's 10. The Resistance, John Connor, kidnap take possession of a T-800 model, which is the Schwarzenegger version, reprogram it, and send it back to protect John at all costs and make sure he lives to lead the Resistance. Along the way, John, with these events occurring around him, John realizes that his mother was right all along, and she's not a crazy person, and so out of guilt, if nothing else, he orders the Terminator to help him rescue her from the state psychiatric correctional facility. The three of them go on the lam. Linda Hamilton, Sarah Connor, has a vision of the future in which she goes mad, I tell you, and decides that she's had enough. She's not going to let the bombs drop. She is going to kill the person who created Skynet before they can create Skynet and end the world. And that person happens to be Miles Dyson. She goes to the house and attempts to murder the man. She stops herself short, clinging to that last hair of humanity that she has. She is then joined by John and the Terminator and the Guardian once more, and once they share forthcoming Judgment Day with Miles, he agrees to help them destroy all of his work and summarily stop Judgment Day. They succeed. The Terminator sacrifices himself to make sure that nothing can be taken from his body and copied and recreated to create Skynet. There are nothing left behind, no strings left. And Sarah and John are able to then move forward without the threat of Skynet and Judgment Day looming over their heads. That's your plot synopsis, as best I can remember it from a few days ago. This is the one I think everyone says is their favorite. This is people have said this is sort of a near perfect movie. You have one small hiccup, which is just your problems in general with time travel. Silly things like you have a time machine and you've messed up your one chance to stop John Connor from being born. How did you get a second shot at this? But whatever. You start asking too many questions about Terminator and time travel, you're going to end up with your brain on drugs, which is an egg in a frying pan. So forget it. It's not even going down that road. But overall, Jesse, this one your favorite too? This the top of the heap?
Oh, absolutely. This right here holds a of all we did on the Screaming Boy podcast, which come up here this coming Saturday. We did a list of top time travel movies to try and fit in with Terminator Week. This was my number 2. My number 1 is Back to the Future. A lot of people already know that, but this is number 2, and really it is up there on probably top 10 of all time, to be honest, movies that I really enjoy. I'm a big fan of the time travel plot device, but let's just like you said, let's throw it all out there because it'll hurt your brain. Okay. The special effects of this movie for the time were freaking unreal. I can remember when this movie came out, I was young enough to be kind of scared of watching rated R movies, especially I remember hearing about Terminator. I don't think I'd seen the first one before I actually saw the second one. And I was kind of, leery about watching this movie because I didn't want to have nightmares. I didn't know what to expect. But sat down and watched the movie, and I was able to get through all the gross parts, but and enjoy the story that was being told. But again, let's harken back to the special effects. Just like I think Sean had mentioned there earlier, this Terminator 1 kind of set the tone for some crazy looking stuff that happened on screen. And then Terminator 2 hits the screen, and you're seeing shit that seems like it's 2, 3, 4, 5 years outside of what we're going to see on screen a lot with the computer-generated graphics. I, for one, loved the T-1000, the way the look of the T-1000. But, okay, so special effects, all right, that's number one. Number two is the twist, okay? This was a movie that when it came out, we're all expecting Arnold Schwarzenegger to be, he's the Terminator, and he still is the Terminator in this movie. But the twist occurs in the movie where he is obviously fighting on the good fight now. And we're not really, I wish I could go, this is one of those things where I wish I could go back and erase the memories that I have of watching this movie, just so I could watch it again and experience that twist, experience that thing that came way from out from left field. Because when you see the T-1000, when you see Robert Patrick's T-1000, he's dressed up as a cop. You know, at the beginning of the movie, he dispatches that one cop, but you don't know if he killed the guy or if he just punched him in the stomach. So at first you're rooting for the bad guy, like almost the whole first quarter of the movie. But again, that would probably be the biggest thing that I loved about the movie, was the fact that it took you on a ride, where ups and downs of this movie, where you were like, holy crap, and then look at that. When the Terminator stoppable, we got an unbeatable robot in the beginning, that the only way we can destroy it is with a hydraulic press and compressing it down to an inch thick. Now we've got water, liquid fucking metal, that we have to try and deal with, and the ways that they have to try and come up with killing this fucking thing. I mean, explosion, and it's kind of like, they just kind of dial it up. Okay, well, what the hell are we going to do next? What are we going to do now? We've already, let's see, we just exploded a tractor trailer around his ass, and oh, here he comes. He's not anything wrong with him. Helicopter explodes, no problem. He gets freaking minigun loaded into his face, no problem. What's going to stop it? I'm going to stop now because I can go on for probably about another 10 minutes, and I know we only got a little bit of time, but there's my shot at it.
I want you to speak to this. Now, they did the old flip, flop, and fly here with the Terminators, as Jesse pointed out. You have your Judas Priest, gay biker looking Terminator in Arnold Schwarzenegger, and then you have the skinny, nerdy looking Robert Patrick, who has a cold, icy stare, but certainly not an imposing figure. But he's But he is your monster. And it's funny because I want to go back to the first movie for a second. Schwarzenegger talks about in the documentary that he actually read for Kyle Reese, and initially, and then for whatever the reasons where they said, no, you're better off as a Terminator. But it was an interesting contrast because Schwarzenegger is so imposing, and the character is supposed to be, it's supposed to be an infiltrator model. It's supposed to be something that is able to just sort of blend into society, into the crowd. And obviously Schwarzenegger, as big as he is, especially back in 1984, where he was only a few years removed from his bodybuilding career, does not blend into a crowd. But it made him, as we talked earlier, made him such an imposing figure because he was so big. In this movie, they go back to the original thought. Let's get a guy who's not imposing looking at all and make him be the unstoppable monster versus Schwarzenegger, who's so big and and he looks like a hero. He's your Hulk Hogan, and Robert Patrick's more of a Daniel Bryan, but everything gets flipped on its head because your Daniel Bryan vegan wimpy looking guy is much more badass and much more tougher and much more deadlier than your Hulk Hogan-looking hero character. So how does that work for you? How does the bringing in of Michael Patrick and flipping the roles of imposition of the characters work for you?
Well, The thing you have to understand about the T-1000 and why it works so well is a big part of the genius of James Cameron. Cameron takes the nuanced, thoughtful, and very measured, calculated performance of Robert Patrick and combines it with special effects that are the culmination of a decade or so of evolution of movies that I mentioned at the top, like Dragon Slayer, Crow, Willow, The Abyss, and so on. And ultimately what you get is a comfortable, seamless meshing of CGI with practical effects that, quite frankly, for that era, only Jurassic Park was able to equal. And when you pair those two, what you have is something that's able to portray Robert Patrick as somebody who is indeed more than a match for the T-800. It just all comes across so well in every combat sequence. Combination of the damage, of the massive exclamation point damage that you see the T-1000 absorbing as Patrick is able to just never break expression, never break character, and just keep on coming. In that sense, it's a truly masterful performance, and you have to chalk it up to all three. Schwarzenegger is physically bringing it the best he possibly can, and it's truly his finest hour, as far as I'm concerned, in not only bringing it physically with the massive physique and stature that he already has, but also with just little touches of subtlety in the slowness of his movement compared to how much more agile and able-bodied the T-1000 is with its liquid metal construction. So it really is something that's very well designed by Cameron, by, I believe it's Stan Winston did the special effects on this. I could be wrong, and I apologize if I am. But it's truly a perfect storm, and there's a reason why this not only stands out for its period so well as being, again, alongside Jurassic Park, arguably the paragon of special effects for the time, but also in terms of combining those special effects with people who are so able to tell a story with their characters and make the action not so much a distraction from the story, but a true complement to it and something that accelerates it and moves it forward.
Okay, at this time I'd like to bring on our title card artist, all the way from New York City, Mr. Benjamin Colon.
New York City! You're welcome, 90s kids.
Ben, where are you?
I'm right where you left me.
Somewhere still cursing the Crow sequels.
Yeah. Well, you know, when apparently I can't resist a movie featuring Edward Furlong, no matter how young he is.
Furlong.
But we are here to talk the Terminator franchise, and very specifically, I had to call in right about now. I had to call in before the discussion of Terminator 2 got any further in because I had to at least throw my 2 cents in about this movie. Terminator 2 is hands down my favorite movie of all time for a good long while. I was a little bit late to that party. I don't think I actually saw the movie in full until they started airing it on TV. I think, you know, when I was at some point when I was in school, they gave it like they were giving it on Sunday nights on like ABC, so it was heavily edited. I remember that ran about 3 hours on broadcast TV, so I didn't get a whole hell of a lot of sleep for school the next day. I know that. Stan Winston did basically all the practical Terminator effects for Terminator 2, and I think Terminator 1 as well, with ILM doing the CGI, which still in a lot of ways holds up today. Which is another thing, talking about the foster parent deaths. There was a lot of that. There was a lot of like really as seamless as you could get it, especially for 1991. You know, back and forth between, you know, the practical and the CGI. The effects were so far ahead of their time at that time. That was, you know, a lot of that stuff just stood with you. The thing about James Cameron is really good at what I call the iconic image, and it's a term that I use a lot more in comics. It's a term that I use a lot more in comics to describe cover art and just to describe people who are good at cover art. And I always use John Romita Jr. as an example. As far as guys that just can distill a scene down to like a single image that is just unforgettable. James Cameron's very good at that. Very good at images that you won't forget. You know, the image, like I said, of the foster parent deaths, the image of, you know, the T-1000 in various states of disrepair after being shot with pistols, shotguns, after at one point Schwarzenegger climbs up a truck and unloads an M16 into his ass.
Yeah.
That
Unstoppable force, man. And Robert Patrick, dude, just playing that part was amazing. But yeah, special effects, dude. It was crazy, some of the stuff that happened.
Yeah, Robert Patrick, a performance so legendary that it even got a little wink in Wayne's World.
That's right, he did. Yeah, I remember that coming down the donut shop, the diner.
Have you seen this boy?
And as you're saying, with the as far as the storytelling, it was a brilliant move and really calculated. You know, the switching up of the roles and having Robert Patrick playing the villain. In some of the notes that I read, they sort of compared it to, you know, Schwarzenegger's Terminator was like a Panzer tank versus, you know, like the stealth bomber or like a Ferrari.
That's a very apt comparison.
For Patrick's T-1000. And just like I said, the role reversal of, you know, Schwarzenegger playing the hero, and they played that up in the advertising. They gave you no hints in the advertising and the trailer.
That's right.
This movie, man. And also, I was kind of, you know, I don't know the trajectory of, you know, everybody's respective careers. I'm actually a little bit surprised that Linda Hamilton didn't do more after this movie. And become to the 90s what James Cameron had made Sigourney Weaver into in the 80s, as far as, you know, the
let me
sort
stop
of
you there.
action heroine.
Hang on. How many action movies has Sigourney Weaver been in outside of the Aliens franchise? I mean, when you think about,
not very many.
when Robert Winfrey and I were talking about this last night, and we were praising Linda Hamilton, you know, for being one of the best female action stars of all time. It's a short list because there aren't that many. You know, your action heroes are typically men, and they bomb. People don't go to see them. The only one I can think of is Angelina Jolie in the Tomb Raider movies, but there was only two of them, and I don't know if the second one did any business at all.
Well, but hang on a second though. I think that's still a fair thing to point out, in the sense that, you know, there have been a lot of movies that have tried to throw out a female-led action cast. The only problem is, in a lot of those movies, the woman they've chosen has not really brought it as convincingly as Linda Hamilton has. I'll give you a good example. In fact, I'll give you a great example. Inarguably the best example for anybody who is familiar with the lore of the making of Terminator 2. Because it to this day is my favorite story about this movie. During the scenes in the mental asylum, there's a certain fairly stocky, fairly tall orderly, I believe his name is Dougie in the movie, who is of a stature that, towers over Linda. He's got her definitely outsized. And Linda, of course, let's just call her Sarah, in the script gets belligerent a number of times and uncooperative. And so a few times, the orderlies really have to tune her up. During these scenes, Linda and the actor who played Dougie butted heads a couple times. Not because he was taking liberties. Actually, it was because, in Linda's opinion, the action wasn't coming across the right way because he was pulling his strikes too much. And she kept telling him repeatedly between takes and with increasing frustration, hit me harder, hit me harder, hit me for real, hit me harder. And he was so reluctant to because he didn't want to hurt her. And what ended up happening later was during the scene when Sarah finally gives Dougie a receipt during her escape, she absolutely stiffed him for real, and I believe broke the man's nose.
Wouldn't be surprised.
No, well, because if you're looking at her in that movie, that's the other difference. And allow me to make a comparison here, and I'm going to make a fair comparison, so please don't jump in with any counter-arguments, because I know what they're going to be, because I have a very old-fashioned, reasonably sexist father who has made the same argument a million times over the years while entirely missing the point every single time. Allow me to compare Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor to Carrie-Anne Moss as Trinity in The Matrix. The comparison being, in that movie, let's just face facts and call a spade, and anybody who wants to draw little caricatures of me with a neck beard and a fedora, number one, go right ahead. Number two, fuck right off. It could only work in that movie because Carrie-Anne Moss does not have the physical presence to make you believe that she would physically be a match for anybody whatsoever. She has a set of arms that are about as big around as my forearms, and they're about that tone. Yes, she's incredibly agile, but the main reason why it's plausible that she would be able to take down figures on the screen who appear to have her outsized by a good 50 to 75 pounds at least is because you have it established that the Matrix has the rule that really your actual physical stature really makes no difference. It's all mental. She can imagine herself being able to do these things. She believes in her mind, in this world, that she's able to, and hence she is. Whereas in reality, she has the build of your typical underwear model. On the other hand, now let's take a look at Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor. Physically, she actually makes you believe that she is 155.6% capable of every physical rigor she is put through throughout this movie. She has that kind of natural presence. She's that talented an actor, and she's in that kind of shape. The aesthetic really carry it off. She really toughened herself up that much that I'm sure that poor actor playing that orderly had no idea that, yeah, she would legitimately be able to bust him open the hard way, because she decided she had enough of him treating her like a shrinking violet. That's why it works. And unfortunately, in the annals of movies that have had female-led action leads, and again, go ahead, disagree with me if you want to, but by all means, throw me a convincing counter-argument. There have been more Carrie-Anne Mosses than there have been Scarlett Johansson's, Sigourney Weaver's, Milla Jovovich's, or Linda Hamilton's. And don't get me wrong, I think it's an absolute tragedy that there haven't been more Cynthia Rothrock's. because there's somebody who was physically, absolutely able to pull off every single thing that she was doing, because 100 fucking % legit martial artist. One of the most decorated in the world prior to her retirement, in fact. But she, for some reason, never really caught on outside of the Hong Kong scene. And in part, I blame that on the fact that, and Mark, I'm sure you would have probably pointed this out in a minute anyway, that Hollywood is thinking of the movie poster. They're thinking of the trailers. They're thinking of who can we pimp to Maxim, FHM, Playboy, blah, 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 whoever, in order to promote this movie. And when it comes down to that, even if you're comparing, say, Gal Gadot to Gina Carano, who is a stone-cold stunner in her own right, they're still going to go with the softer, more feminine-looking Gal Gadot, because she's less intimidating. And unfortunately, that's what motivates a lot of the casting decisions, as opposed to somebody who can bring that kind of legitimacy to a character.
No, I said, I've said on a few podcasts back, I said, Hollywood hates women, and you were, and you were kind of stunned by that sentence. But what I mean by that is, when they look to cast men, typically,
no, they do. You're right.
They
I agree with you.
That can carry the part. When they cast a woman, it's about her. 9 out of 10 times, it's about her physical feature. And I think I said this to you last 2 nights ago. There's a great line in season 3 of Orange Is the New Black, where Sophia, who's the transgendered character, is giving her son advice, and it's pretty sexist advice. And he looks back at her and he says, "In a world that treats women this way, I can't believe you still want to be one." And she says, "God help me, I do." But it just sucks. It sucks to have it. It sucks to be a girl, to be a woman in a world that, even with all their achievements, even with a hero figure like Sarah Connor out there, still summarily views them as material sex objects.
I'd like to think this is a good note to go out on for Terminator 2, and it's about basically my favorite scene in the movie, and it appropriately enough, it revolves around Linda Hamilton, and the more I think about it, the more I think that this is earned, and it's probably a big reason why it's my favorite part. But throughout the movie, and you take the knowledge of the first movie with you, where Sarah Connor is a very different character, and what she's become in part 2 in order to protect her son, and by extension protect the future of the human race. And she's had to become kind of cold and a little bit fierce in order to do that. And throughout the movie, she's continuing to try to protect John, and a lot of that involves running, just like in the first movie. She's running with her son. She's running from Schwarzenegger in the early first couple of minutes that they encounter each other. Then they're running together. They're running, they're running from the authorities. They're running from the T-1000. She's running to the character of Miles Dyson, and thinking that she's going to kill him and be able to stop Judgment Day from happening. And she realizes she's not a killer. And, there's a lot of, throughout the movie, she's running, and it's for the purposes of protecting her son and protecting, what comes after that. Then you get to the part at the very end of the movie where she's cornered. Schwarzenegger's nowhere to be found. As far as they know, the T-1000 may have already destroyed him. And she has to protect her son still. They're in the steel mill. And this is where she stops running. And she's got a shotgun. She's got a loaded shotgun in her hand, and it's just her pumping shotgun shells into Robert Patrick over and over and over again, and you read everything on her face, and it's a release, and it's like she's almost glad that she doesn't have to run anymore. You see it on her face that she almost feels glad that she doesn't have to run anymore, that she can confront this, this representation of everything she's been running from, and she can solve this problem. She can end this with, by confronting it. And it's just one of the most awesome things I've ever seen in a movie ever is this, Linda Hamilton staring down this unstoppable killing machine and just blasting it repeatedly over and over again. And there's a moment that I thought, because she runs out of shotgun shells, the shotgun is empty, and, she keeps trying to fire it repeatedly, and she can't, and it's empty. And there's this one moment, if you look really carefully, she looks like she's about to spear him off the ledge, and and take a dive, both of them, into the steel. And you believe that because you read on her face. It's just that her son grabs her and kind of stops her, and then Schwarzenegger shows up and unloads a grenade in Robert Patrick's ass, and it's really awesome there too. But
yeah.
That's just such a good culmination of everything that this movie and even the first movie was about. It all comes together right in that scene, and if Linda Hamilton doesn't play it in just the right way, you lose a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about. But she plays it so well, and that's why that's my favorite part of that movie. And like I said, it's one of the coolest things ever to me is just how that all played out. So that's my last thought to go out on Terminator 2.
I want to talk about two things before we move on to Rise of the Machines. And I think kind of have to talk about Edward Furlong. But I also want to talk about.
So does anybody ever have to talk about Edward Furlong?
We do in this case. But before we do, I want to talk about Ben mentioned it just a few minutes ago. My favorite scene in the movie, really my favorite sequence, is it starts with Linda Hamilton having the vision of Judgment Day, waking up and taking off and heading to the Dyson home, and her deciding she's going to assassinate the man. She misses him. She goes into the house. She corners him, and she's just ranting. She's like, "I'm not going to let you." She doesn't know. Unlike Michael Bonanza, she's just saying, "I'm not going to let you do it. I'm not going to let you do it. I'm not going to let you kill all those people." And he's just kind of looking at her, going, "Look, you crazy white woman. What is your problem in life? What? How did we get here?" And she had, and she retains that last thread of humanity by stopping herself from shooting him in the head. And moments later, John and the Terminator show up, and we proceed to do exposition, getting everyone caught up to speed. But I kind of want to get your reactions to that scene, because in a lot of ways, as they start to humanize the Schwarzenegger character, the Guardian, she becomes dehumanized, and there's a sort of flashpoint in the movie where if she goes too far, she will have lost her humanity. She will have lost the battle before a bomb even drops. I just kind of want to get your reactions to that. I think that's the high water mark of the movie. That is probably the most important scene in the movie.
Yeah, it's definitely up there. When you got Sarah starts out and she's, if it wasn't for that RC Pro-Am truck that hits the kid hits him in the leg, she would have took him out with that one shot. But it's she's laying those freaking bullets down and shredding his office up, trying to shoot this guy, and then when she gets up close and personal, that's where she realizes what she's about to do. Throughout these years in between these movies, she's hardened herself to become this great warrior, to try and, she is the mother of one of the leaders of the resistance, and she has got to learn how to bring this kid up right. And so she's become almost a hardened, I don't want to say criminal, but she's she's definitely one tough son of a girl. I might have said that wrong, but anyway, tremendous scene because she gets right up close and she can't do it, and it definitely speaks to how what we see a lot of in this trilogy is the weak person becoming the hero or the warrior. You see that throughout all three of these. I mean, the first one you saw Sarah evolve into this. She was, just like you said, some club hopping young late teenage girl, and she gets this thrust upon her to where she has to deal with it. And now she's dealt with it, and then she's about to pull the trigger and kill this. He's an innocent man right there, even though he is potentially responsible for the death of billions of people. At that point in time, he is an innocent man, and she finally comes to grips with the fact that what is going on right now is all that matters. It doesn't matter what's going to happen, 10, 15 years in the future. It's right now is all that matters, and she makes the right decision.
Sean, go ahead and add to that if you want, if there's something you have to say. But I also, like I said, I want to get to Edward Furlong. A couple of things about him. I said before, if the actress playing Sarah Connor doesn't work, she can't act, and I think the whole thing falls apart. And that's certainly true of this movie. But Edward Furlong still had an important part to play, and I would tell you that I think studio executives probably in their mind discounted Linda Hamilton and placed a lot of importance on Edward Furlong, and he was expected to be a breakout star in this and all of that. Now, I will continue to defend that this is, I think, Sarah's story more than his. But would you say that Edward Furlong did a decent job with the character? Did a terrible job? Did about as good as any child actor does in any movie? Where would you rate Edward Furlong, and do you think he detracts from the movie or adds to it?
The only thing I would really add about Sarah Connor is just the fact that Terminator 2 pulls off something that, to the best of my knowledge, only The Crow does really well, and that is it takes what it establishes, what the previous movie established as the hero of the movie, and deepens that descent into hell by jarring us loose and making us watch her become the embodiment of everything she was afraid of in the first place, all while the machine that she's been fighting the entire time, that she's been sitting in that cell fearing, has gradually become more human, compassionate, and caring than she is. Kind of makes us briefly a little bit reluctant to cheer for her. But when it comes to Edward, it's really hard to gauge how much of this is just what you could really call acting, in the traditional Stanislavski method sense, and how much of it is just point the camera at Edward and don't tell him it's on. Sadly, I don't think we'll ever really know how great he could have become because, well, after this movie, what happened to him was what has killed a lot of other promising young actors. Miraculously, he managed to live through it, but he never quite developed that devotion to craft that actually might have made him an up-and-comer. It's really hard to say that there's anything all that engaging because really all he is just an engine, a motivation, and a bit of a catalyst for the Terminator to gradually evolve. He's something for Arnold to play off of. Arnold, there's no other way to put it. He's the straight man of the pair, and he's kind of the loose cannon. And in this case, it works, but it's hard for me to give just a whole lot of credit to Edward because for most of the movie, well, let me put it this way. If you ever haven't seen this and you want to experience roughly what the Edward Furlong method of acting is like, step one, go rent Empire Records, which you should anyway, because it's a really underrated 90s indie movie. So now that you've done that, find the shoplifting scene. That moment where Ethan Embry at the top of his lungs shrieks, "Shoplifter!" Okay, take that clip, loop it for about 2 hours, and then throw in the sound of two cats and teeth fighting in the background. That's about what it's like to listen to Edward Furlong deliver most of this movie's dialogue. It's a combination of him doing his best possible impression of Bobby Budnick from Salute Your Shorts and expressing his idea of what ribald unbridled emotion is by ear-splitting shrieking. But the only thing is, as I will remind everybody, miraculously, his performance in The Crow makes this look like King Lear.
The more I think about Edward Furlong in this movie, the more I hear the words, he reminds me of Poochie from The Simpsons. People don't know the reference. They wanted to add a character to Itchy and Scratchy, and it was a character creation by executives trying to appeal to every audience. And I feel like that's how his character is written. I feel like that's how I feel like that's how he portrayed the character. I just, it was like people sitting around writing the script and shooting it, like, don't know how children behave. And just kind of, they had an idea in their head, and they're like, well, let's do this. And they ran with it, and he did the best job he could with it. But I look at that and I go, it's a good thing the rest of this movie is really good, because you're not adding a damn thing to it. You are not charming. You are not precocious. You are not cute. You deliver dialogue that's almost pandering to a kid audience. Like, kids are supposed to look at him and go, yeah, I'm going to start saying, are you calling moi a douchebag? It was just the most robotic, kind of inhuman reaction to things, more robotic than even Schwarzenegger, if you can believe that. So, whenever I watch it, he's my least favorite part of that movie. Jesse, Burning Desires here. I want to move on to Night Machine.
Okay, let me speak on Edward Furlong, and as a friend of mine I used to work with, always used to start out his phone conversations with two things. Okay, we got two things. Edward Furlong was not had no intentions of being an actor, and you guys probably already know this. He was plucked from the streets of wherever he lived by a casting agent. So I assume he probably lived in Los Angeles, somewhere on the West Coast. But he was working at a youth center. This is all from IMDb, so don't think I'm just coming off this off the top of my head here. But working at a youth center, some lady comes up and plucks him out of there and says, "Hey, would you like to audition for the part?" And this was straight up for John Connor. This was his first ever role. So, I shudder to think that they would just take him and shove him into the role without giving him some lessons. But this guy was definitely, just tossed into the fire and then tried to make a career out of something that he may not have damn well been good at it in the first place.
I'm gonna look him up, but actually I think you may not be all that far off in terms of him just really being thrown into this. Because I could swear, because I once upon a time owned one of the deluxe 2-disc DVD editions. I forget which one it was. I think it was the Extreme edition of Terminator 2 that had just like 3 or 4 really excellent trivia tracks. It's the one I would recommend picking up on Amazon if you're not amenable to getting it on Blu-ray.
True. Yeah.
So, you know, it makes me almost feel kind of bad for how much I just taunted him a minute ago about how much of it was really acting, but at the same time, no, you know what? There's a point when there's an excuse, and there's a point when dumb shit person is dumb shit. Well, yeah.
It's you got to think this casting agent. I mean, it's still top 10 of my movies, so I can't bitch because if he was that horrible to me, then I would. This would definitely be one of those ones I can. But you know, so I guess he did a good job for being thrown into one of the biggest blockbuster movies of that summer, for absolutely sure.
Well, and you know, allow me to briefly put on my Mark hat for a moment, and be entirely fair to him as at the time developing juvenile, and that is the fact that few are the young actors at that age that come into the kind of money and fame and kind of fall all over you ass kissing that comes with starring in a major movie like that. It's not just something that you see in movies. It's something that we've seen 100,000 times over. You might as well have just thrown a keg of gunpowder into a bonfire. Without the right opportune guidance, it's going to end badly. And for Furlong, it ended badly. It just happened that in this case, it was a role for which, and now I'm saying this only half jokingly, he didn't really have to act that much. He just had to go be himself and pretty much just have somebody just tell him what to say. He might as well have had somebody hanging over his shoulder kind of directing him on a prank call. It's just say this, say this, say this, and all day he gets to hang out with Arnold effing Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, no shit.
Gets to watch Linda Hamilton make a 250 plus pound actor her bitch. He's in the coolest environment in the world. Shit's blowing up. Guns are going off. He's living the life of Riley. But at the same time, he has nobody telling him how to keep it in perspective. And it just so happened, though, that in this one instance, it was basically that crucible was just the right, you know, kind of methody sort of set of ingredients that it needed to be.
You know, if I hear you say that, though, I think that speaks to how they basically wasted that character then, and why John, you know, and why I continue to say that John is a weak character, because, I mean, you know, to a degree, I agree with you. A lot of the dialogue that he is given is, again, Poochie. There's some executive, you know, some screenwriter who thinks this is the way kids talk, but just say this. This will make you sound like an obnoxious kid. And that's, I guess, what we want here. There was an opportunity to tell the story of a child scarred by his mother, raising him among gun runners, you know, and people teaching him how to fight for a cause he knew nothing about. There's an opportunity for pathos there. There's an opportunity for intrigue, and it was wasted because they were like, here, let's get some cute kid with a troubled past in this movie, and that should suffice because really all people came here to see was Schwarzenegger blow things up. And that's the frustrating thing to me about a lot of Hollywood decision making is like we don't have to put a lot of energy or time into scripts and into characters because, you know, you've already baited the hook, and the hook is just the other thing. You know, I said this last night. The reason why I think Terminator Genesis bombed, part of it this weekend, was exactly that. It doesn't really matter that Jai Courtney can't act or you know, that our plot makes no sense. People just want to come see Arnie blow stuff up. And they said this in 2015, where he's no longer a relevant actor. But if you want to hear me,
Well, let me just speak on that real quick,
uh,
because that was my second thing.
go ahead.
Edward Furlong's still kicking it. All right. If you are as Trekkie, my friends, if you guys enjoy Star Trek Renegades will at least, and so I don't know if he's going to be. I doubt he's going to be the star, but he will be in Star Trek Renegades, the TV movie. Apparently, as a character by the name of Fixer. So, just when you guys watch that, if you're a Trekkie, Edward Furlong's in there somewhere.
I am going to be, and then when I watch it, I'm going to be praying that he has a shiny red shirt.
It could have been.
All right, so Terminator 3 comes out in 2003. This is 12 years later, and this definitely suffers from the more dinosaurs issue. First of all, Linda Hamilton not in the movie at all. So this is, they take because she's not in the movie for whatever the reasons are. They move the shift away from the interesting character.
What happened was Linda Hamilton turned the role down.
Okay.
They actually had a part written for her, but what happened was she read it, and as she said in interviews, she felt that the character's arc was complete. She dies halfway through it. She didn't really add anything, so she said thanks, but no thanks. In my opinion, she read this turkey and went, fuck no, this is gonna suck.
So the shift moves from her to John, who, as I said, is not an interesting character. And when I say this suffers from more dinosaurs, this is, again, one of those things where some people are sitting around a table and going, okay, why do people go see Terminator movies? Well, they go to see Arnold, okay? And they go to see robots blowing themselves up. And that may be, on the surface what people see when they see these movies, but when you actually sit down and watch them, there's a lot more going on, as we've discussed. But this movie lacks all of that. This movie, and again, when I say more dinosaurs, it's like, okay, here, let us assume no one saw the first two movies. Let's give them more of the same, only bigger and better. So instead of having a guy Terminator, we'll have a girl Terminator. And this one will have even more magic than the last one. She'll be able to, she'll have weapons, and she'll be a transformer.
Here's a little something curious to think about, and then kind of let us know how this bakes your ZD. In Terminator 2, we got a little pissant juvenile delinquent that they found at a Boys and Girls Club and managed to rein in just long enough for him to shoot a major blockbuster in what was more or less a pretty effective role. Definitely served the purpose that he needed, and for as much shit as we just gave him, you got to admit, pretty impressive for a first timer. So non-actor, this movie, because Eddie loved the drugs and the drugs loved him, we instead stall as John Connor. So we get an actual actor who puts in what I think kind of resembles effort. And and God, by the end of the first act, you actually kind of miss Furlong.
Ugh. Yeah.
Which I believe now, I mean, again, correct me if I'm wrong here, this may be kind of a cursed role, because I seem to remember that a few years ago, wasn't there something like a scare where Nick Stahl had gone missing, and he was found, like, wasn't he living on the streets of Los Angeles or something? Like, basically homeless?
Wow.
So somebody looked this up, because I could have sworn that was what happened. Because I remember there were a couple days where that was a big story, like Nick Stahl missing. Or I may be thinking of somebody else.
Well, I can tell you,
that was who it was.
When I watched this movie today, because I watched it, right before I got on here, I was scratching my head as to who the hell the guy was. I've never seen him in anything else that remotely made me go, oh shit, that's so and so.
He wasn't. I believe he was in Sin City.
Yes, and so I'm going through the filmography now, and I
Yes.
see that he was in that, and he was in Thin Red Line at some point. But again, not an actor that I'm extremely aware of, and I don't even know if I'd recognize him today, to be honest. Of course, his biggest, I'd say his biggest thing under his belt, in my eyes, would be Terminator 3. I can't even remember what he did in Sin City. Was it something?
I believe
something major?
he was. I believe he was the younger Rourke, the son, the one who became the Yellow Bastard. I think that's who he was. I think that's who he played. If you're looking at his filmography and it says he played someone named Rourke, then that's who he was.
Yeah, Rourke Jr.
Yeah. Which I gotta hand to him. Actually, that was a pretty good performance because he had to really play a kitty raping psychopath through a whole lot of makeup, and he did a pretty nice little job. I gotta hand it to him. Credit where it's due there. But God, in this movie, I missed a little mop-haired pissant. I've been thinking, does Betty Ford have like an express package you could have shoved him through? Because God in heaven, he is not carrying this movie where he needs to. Also, funny thing, there was actually a lot of quick cast boogie going on here because Claire Danes, who plays Kate Brewster, was also kind of haphazardly shoved into the film because the studio execs decided prior to production that the original first choice, Sophia Bush, was just too young for the role. Nothing scandalous or anything there. Just now you want someone a little bit older. And I don't know if there was really an extensive casting process to how the chick from Blood Rain made it into the movie.
Claire Danes.
No, I was talking about Christiana Logan.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
No. Thank merciful Christ, there were some top-notch actors in Blood Rain that made me go, "The fuck did you end up in this? What kind of bunko did that mildly retarded Kraut feed you to get you to sign on the dotted line?" But thankfully, the ingenue of My So-Called Life and numerous other great movies, not a part of Uwe Boll's Citizen Kane.
Oh man, Uwe, whatever, Uwe Boll. Okay, before Mark brings us back on track, because I know he's just itching to do so. Bit of movie trivia for you here, Sean. Okay, you ready?
Yes. Fire away, mon ami.
We got 3 Terminator movies. Arnold Schwarzenegger has been in all 3. Okay, this is a fact.
Yes, he has.
There's another character that's been in all 3. Do you know which character that is?
I am interested. Who is this other character?
The psychologist.
There you go.
Really?
Yep.
All that.
I've never noticed that.
Yeah, he has kind of a cameo type role in this third one, where he walks up to Claire Danes, and he's like a trauma counselor now, and then Schwarzenegger walks out with a casket on his shoulder, and he makes a fucking run for it.
Yeah, he does. He gets the hell out. Now, my question, real quick: does he show up in Genesis?
No.
Damn.
No, but they have J.K. Simmons. I can't even say it's like in that role. I thought that's where they were going with that character, but they go in the opposite direction.
Yeah, you see, including just that little bit more of ties to the original would have maxed out the blast processing. Can't have that either. So, see, Rise of the Machine does what Genesis don't.
in the interest of time, because I do want to wrap up the show before I fall asleep. So the real quick plot synopsis: the Transformer Poochie TX, everything, everybody, more dinosaur robot, gets sent back to kill. They can't find John Connor because he's gone off the grid. That's the next Stahl character they were talking about. So she's sent back to kill all of his lieutenants, including his wife, who's Claire Danes. They send back the Terminator to protect her from the TX. John Connor ends up coming out of hiding. Him and Claire Danes go with the Terminator and end up going on the run together, though she thinks she's being kidnapped. They figure out that her dad is now responsible for the program that will inevitably become Skynet. They go to stop Skynet from coming online, but it's too late. And basically, her dad tells them, they believe that he's sending them to where Skynet servers are. Turns out he's actually sending them to a bunker for VIPs.
Mark, do you believe that cars can fucking drive themselves after a TX goes in there? I don't give a shit what future you're from. You're not going to plug into a 1999 or 2000 cop car and a fucking fire truck and have it drive itself.
This is what I was trying to say about 10 minutes ago, that it was like they looked at Terminator 2 and a little bit of the first one and said, okay, let's take the same beats, let's take a lot of the same stuff and just do more of that. Again, not looking at character, not looking at story, just beats and action sequences and saying, okay, this is what people came here for, and threw it together. I mean, look, I'm going to sum this up in the interest of time. Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, if you have never seen the first two movies and know nothing about the Terminator lore, is a fine enough action chase movie. Unfortunately, like I said, it's just when you plug it back into the narrative, it's just a rip-off of Terminator 2. It's the same exact movie, only done
just turned up to 11. Yeah.
Okay, now here's a question. Here's a question that I wanted to pose to both of you, though. And I tell you, I was biting my nails when Ben brought it up because I was actually planning on bringing this up just now to help fill in this particular segment. Both of you, weigh in here, and I'm going to remain completely out of it because I just want to hear what you two have to say. Weigh in on why it is, seriously, that James Cameron seems to be the only one who can get Terminator right.
So now, as for the only thing I can think of is it's James Cameron's baby. He is he's the maker. He is the maker. He is, and then when he gets his hands on that, or when he's had his hands on that, it looks beautiful. And when anybody else gets a hold of it, it's like they turn it into, they try. You can't say that these people don't try. They just don't know what to do with it. We would all sit here and say that you give me that stuff and I'll turn it into the most beautiful gem that is ever placed on the big screen. But what we may end up finding out is that it could be all for naught. It could also be a big, too many hands in the pot, too many cooks in the kitchen. You get a lot of people saying, they come in and say, no, that won't work, and then you got, fucking big-ass crane going down the street, destroying buildings somehow. That's my theory. Mark?
I don't think anybody else understands the Terminator movies. I think they do. I think they see the movie and they make assumptions like, action sequences, cars flipping up in the air. They don't. I mean, studio executives are not literature people. They're not sitting there scrutinizing these films and, like we are, breaking them down and looking at what makes them speak to the audience. They're looking at spreadsheets, they're looking at numbers, and that's it. That's what's driving them. I said this last night. I said people aren't going to see a lot of the new and interesting movies that are out there. Tomorrowland bombed, so they look at what's already made money, and they're assuming it's making money. They make assumptions about why it does. Arnold's in it, whatever, and then they say, okay, go and do that. This is why I laugh at like the idea of a new Ghostbusters movie, because how that conversation could have possibly gone. Like, oh well, that was Ghostbusters was popular back in the '80s. I'm sure it will be again, and people will go see it. And that's it. That's as much thought as that's put into it. We've 2 hours ago we started this conversation about what made the original Terminator movie, speak to American audiences the way that it did. But they don't ever do that, and they don't hire people who speak up and talk about it. So that's your answer. Unfortunately, if you happen to get people working on a movie who really put some thought into things, I gotta look at Marvel Studios, and not everyone loves the Marvel movies, but I would tell you that the Marvel movies seem to handle real human emotions and problems going on in the world as well as they possibly can while telling a fun narrative. They're not perfect, but I would say that Marvel's got people working on them that put care and craft into their movies. I can't say that for a lot of other movie studios. It's just one cash grab after another.
But when it comes to this movie, what do we really add to it at this point? Because it's a movie that the whole idea is, unlike Terminator 2, which ends on a hopeful note, and the first movie that ends on a very sequel-baity note, this one sort of ends on a bit of a downer. In fact, if you were going to really call any movie Terminator Genesis, this would have been the one to do it, because the whole thing ends.
Let me jump in here. Let me jump in here. The movie was supposed to set up this guy who has become an outcast, living off the grid, afraid of his own future, and have him step into his own and have him embrace the hero that he was always meant to be. And we've seen that story. We've seen that story told 1,000 times, but we've also seen it told much better. That's the ultimate failure of this movie. Is that's what they were going for. They just he's not. The character isn't interesting. His journey isn't interesting. There's not a lot. Schwarzenegger does all the work basically, and he doesn't do anything. So his one moment where he claims the hero within is he grabs a microphone and introduces himself. Like, that's it. That's what they came up.
Well, yeah, because as we find out at the end, the nuclear missiles have started raining down all over the globe outside of the fallout shelter, which Kate and John initially thought was the core of Skynet. And as the distress calls start coming in, they have kind of a little take charge moment together, and that's pretty much where the movie ends. And then roll credits. Except this one was not improved by a director's cut ending. But otherwise, Mark, you really summed it up pretty well when you pointed out that it's a generic chase movie. That's all it. This might as well have been an Asylum knockoff of a Terminator movie, because you're getting all the slam bang action, which I will concede once more looks fantastic, but you're also getting none of the meat of the character development that you should get with something that's picking up after Terminator 2. Because, it sounds like a promising enough premise. It's just that everybody misses that James Cameron wove all that action in with actually watching people and one machine develop and evolve over the course of the events that befall them. And again, we're getting a hero's journey tale, but it's nothing that feels ding. Once more, call to action, descent into hell, and I guess you could say he kind of becomes master of two worlds, because he's not so much striding the mundane and the extraordinary as it is just the fact that he's experienced the past, he's lived with kind of the prophecy, so to speak, and now he's living the future that was predicted, and he'd embraced it.
It kind of reminds me of The Sword and the Stone. If you've ever seen the Disney animated version of it.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good comparison. I hadn't thought of that.
Arthur pulls the sword out of the stone on a whim, basically, like just completely, like out of nowhere. He happened, it's if anyone hasn't seen it, he's left Kay's equipment or whatever back at the castle, and so he's like got to find his sword really quick. So he happens to grab the sword and the stone. He doesn't realize what the significance of that is, and he's able to pull it out. I'm like, where'd you get the sword from? I got it from the stone. He's oblivious to what he's just done, and so he's made king. To kind of fast forward here, and if you look at him sitting on the throne, the crown doesn't fit. It's like falling over his eyes. The fur that he's wearing is too big. The throne itself is just swallowing him whole. It's like, yeah, you're king now. I was like, I didn't mean to be. Yeah, I don't want to be. And it just doesn't fit.
My advice, some of the better aspects of Kyle Rayner's run as a Green Lantern, and you kind of sort of get the same thing, just with much better storytelling. I can't believe I just recommended Kyle Rayner to somebody.
Jesse, Burning Desires, go.
Terminator 3, I can't really do anything but echo what you've said, where it's very much double. It's like they should have just skipped it and made it Terminator 4 because it's 2 times what Terminator 2 was. We got a semi truck exploding in Terminator 2. Well, now we've got a Terminator-driven crane that's just wreaking havoc upon the world. Not only do we have one person in Terminator 2 struggling with the fact that they are of what their destiny is, in Terminator 3, we're going to make it 2 people. And we're also going to fuck with you and make it a love story, because now he has to deal with the fact that that's going to be his wife. Really, there isn't much of a love story there. But again, at some point they're going to become husband and wife, and the Terminator just decides to let them know about it. And hey, Terminator 2, the T-1000, all he could do was stab people. So that's the best he could do. Terminator 3, the TX, they can actually shoot something. They can actually shoot weapons. So again, it's just turn it up to 11, put Arnold Schwarzenegger in there, and there's your summer blockbuster. I don't even know if this came out in summer, but I assume that it did, because it definitely had that feel to it. But I watched it again today. I enjoyed it. It's not like I hated it or anything, but it pales in comparison. That's all I have to say.
Terminator 3 almost rises to the level of destruction porn, and that's not what the Terminator movies are about.
Yeah.
That's really the little.
It's supposed to be horror.
That's my summation of the Terminator trilogy. Is there's more going on here than Michael Bay blowing things up. So
Michael Bay or Michael Bay?
Thank you, Jesse. So with that said, that ends our discussion of the Terminator trilogy. Again, this was a setup for Salvation, and Salvation was supposed to be the beginning of a new trilogy that was supposed to be post Judgment Day. But again, whether the studio just doesn't understand what people want in these movies, or they just they do, but they made a bad movie and there was no recovering from it. The idea of a new trilogy died after Salvation, and so they went back to the well again, and they brought all the old characters back, and they made Terminator Genesis. And if you would like to hear my thoughts on Genesis, go back into the archives and check out our review from yesterday here on the Rattlegion Broadcasting Network.